And joining us now with more is U.S. Senator Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee. Senator Blackburn, great to have you on. We just got unemployment data. Another 412,000 Americans filing for first-time unemployment benefits last week. And this is as most states are at least partially open. Most are fully reopened. How are we in this position where about a year and a half into the pandemic, so many Americans are first losing their jobs?
It's so interesting to see this because there are 9 million jobs that are available in the country. So this is one of those things that seems to be out of balance. What we do know is that states like my home state of Tennessee that really opened early, got people back to work, got children back to school. The National Guard did a brilliant job of working with local health entities to get people vaccinated. The economy is back open. Our unemployment numbers are coming down. This month, next week actually, the plus up in unemployment insurance is going to end. And we're diligently working with those that lost their jobs through no fault of their own to make certain that they have employment. Now, one thing we do know, Heather, is that some of your small businesses have had a very difficult time keeping their jobs open because they have some employees but not enough employees, or because the cost of fuel has gone up, the cost of operating that business. And you mentioned the inflation. We've got businesses that were hanging on by a thread. And when the cost of capital escalates and when inflation and the products that they are using escalate, it is different. And here's an example of some of that cost escalation. Someone that produces snack foods said the cost of transportation and logistics had increased. The cost of the oil that they use in those foods, that had increased. The cost of the packaging that the snack foods go in, that cost had gone up. So therefore, you're going to see the cost of all of these products increase because it is costing that business more to do business, to stay in business.
I mean, look, anybody who's bought anything recently knows that inflation
Yes.
is a problem, and it is costing Americans a lot more money to just
Yes.
kind of do anything. Jerome Powell seems to think it's going to be fleeting and transitory. What should be done to keep inflation in check?
One of the first things that could be done is restarting the Keystone Pipeline. President Biden's decision to end that on day one, that has thrown a lot of people out of work. And you talk about first-time filers, there are people that had been with KXL on the pipeline, and those jobs had been terminated. A lot of those remaining jobs had been terminated. But this is something that has frustrated our Canadian partners, who are our largest trading partner. It is something that has frustrated elected officials and communities where this pipeline was going to go from the Canadian border down to the Gulf. So that would be a great first step to say, you know what, we misjudged on this. The price at the pump is too high. The price at the cash register for goods that have to be packaged, bags that you're putting fresh produce in, all of that is too high. We're going to go back and reconsider that Keystone decision.
You mentioned Tennessee doing a good job in terms of the vaccine rollout. There are surveys that show Republican men some of the most hesitant to get the vaccine, and we know that high vaccination rates really tied to not only fewer hospitalizations and better health outcomes in terms of coronavirus, but this ability to reopen the economy. Are you worried at all about the vaccine hesitancy amongst Republicans?
I encourage everyone to talk to their physician and see what their physician says about getting the vaccine. We know that there are some individuals that have comorbidities and they have been encouraged not to get the vaccine. So this is a decision that people should make with their physician. I'm one of those that believes that vaccines work. It doesn't matter if it's the annual flu vaccine or COVID or any of those that we give our precious children as they are growing up. So people need to be talking to their physician about this, not reading things on the internet and deciding that they are or are not going to take a vaccine.
Speaking of the internet, one thing Republicans and Democrats seem to agree on is that something needs to be done in terms of regulating social media. But there are differences in solutions. What do you think should be done in terms of social media and the tech sector in general in terms of regulation?
Yeah, Heather, I am the ranking Republican on the Consumer Protection Data Security Subcommittee. Senator Blumenthal is the chairman of that committee. And of course, our chair of Commerce Committee is Senator Cantwell. And I work well with them. I call it the Virtual You Protection Agenda, dealing with online privacy. And indeed, Senator Blumenthal and I did Politico's roundtable on privacy last week. We did that together. We have a tremendous amount of agreement. Much of it comes around a piece of legislation I've had for years, which would allow you to own your virtual you, as I call it. And it would require that social media platforms get your explicit consent. You would have to opt in if you were going to give them permission to share your information. You also would have the ability to opt out to keep them from sharing your browsing information. And then they couldn't boot you off the platform. You'd have one set of rules for the entire internet ecosystem. You would have one enforcer, the FTC. So that's kind of the basis on privacy. We also are looking at data security, Section 230 reform, and then Senator Klobuchar and some of us are working on antitrust and how we approach antitrust.
Yeah, I know. I think that opt-in versus opt-out, definitely really important. I just want to quickly talk about infrastructure. I know that you're calling for maybe a pared-down version of some type of infrastructure proposal, about $400 billion without a tax hike. How would you pay for that then?
There are dollars that have been appropriated that have not been used, and those monies should be repositioned and pay for it. Bear in mind, traditional infrastructure, I'll give you the 4 R's. And in Memphis, this is the way we talk about infrastructure. Roads, rails, runways, and rivers. And looking at those 4 and meeting the needs of our airports, our waterways, our roads and bridges, making certain that our railroads, these are all components that need to be addressed in an infrastructure bill. Now, a surface transportation bill, we moved out of Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee yesterday on a bipartisan vote. That is what the American people want to see. They have zero patience with saying the definition of the infrastructure is evolving. We want it to cover early childhood. We want it to cover expanding unions. We want it to cover elder care. People right now are saying, no, let's fix roads and bridges. Let's get our airports working. Let's dredge our waterways. Let's move more goods and produce and products and energy components by rail and not on the highways. And that's what people are wanting to see right now.
And Senator, we don't have much time left. I'm just wondering, though, is there anything that you've seen from the Biden administration that you like, that you think has been a step in the right direction?
I would have to give that some thought. I'm sure there's something that I could come up with. My focus mainly is on the Senate. And in the Senate, as I mentioned to you, when it comes to technology policy, we've got a good bit of bipartisan work going on when it comes to defending the military, working on our Senate Armed Services Committee, working on veterans and meeting the needs there. Indeed, there is a good bit of bipartisan work.
All right. Thanks so much for coming on. U.S. Senator Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee, appreciate your time this morning.